All right, all right, all right. And we are live. You know what time it is. It is that day, that magic time, that magic number. It is Sunday at 7 p.m., where tonight we are going to be sharing some amazing nuggets. We're going to be talking about knowledge, right? Talking about how gaining knowledge around your credit, money, and finances can truly, truly impact your success. Hi, guys. You all know who I am. I am Sharonda McDaniel. I am your host for tonight. And this evening, I have an amazing guest in store for you. I'm going to be bringing up someone who is, living up to the title. His name is Knowledge, right? But he's full of knowledge where he's going to be bringing some very valuable information to us on things that we can do to better manage our money. Most importantly, our credit and our finances. We really don't have to figure it out when we have somebody giving you free game. Tonight, guys, we have the privilege of having an amazing special guest, Knowledge Beckham. He is a podcaster, financial literacy advocate, and business owners. When we talk about someone that wears multiple hats, this guy wears multiple hats, but he wears multiple hats, ultimately giving us all the ability to be taught. We're able to learn, hear information from him. And today, he is going to be sharing some incredible information for you. I'm going to be bringing him up, and I hope that you guys are in store for a great, great show on tonight. Hey, Knowledge, how are you?
What's going on, Sharonda? This is interesting being on the other end and the other side. But how are you tonight?
I am awesome, awesome. Thank you so much for asking. But most importantly, thank you for taking on the invitation and joining us here on my own show, because we know you're very busy and you do have your own podcast. So it is much appreciated to have you on the show today.
Indeed, I appreciate it. I've been watching your work over the last month or so. Very entertaining, informative, and educational episodes. So just want to say keep up the great work.
Awesome. Why, thank you. Why, thank you. It means a lot, especially coming from you, your own podcast. I've been checking you out and I'm like, got some work to do. What you definitely inspire. You definitely inspire. So, Knowledge, I want to jump right in because you are full of wisdom. You have a lot of things that you can cover, and I don't want to miss a moment of this greatness. Let's just start out with you telling us a little bit about who you are.
Wow. So I like to say I'm an entrepreneur with a day job. My entrepreneurial venture started very young. I remember, I think I want to say as early as third grade. My pops took me to what's now known as Sam's Club, used to be called BJ's back in the day. But for whatever reason, I asked him to front me some candy, right? And he fronted me some candy, M&M's, Snickers, what have you. I started going to school with two book bags, one with my schoolwork, the other with the candy. And it started in my classrooms, but very quickly I was able to enterprise, and they were allowing me into other classrooms to sell my candy. And so anybody that went to grammar school with me, they're going to say Knowledge was getting it early, right? And I've just continued to always have a desire and an interest to make money, right? And to make money move. And as I've grown into an adult, that entrepreneurial spirit never stopped. But I also fell into sales, which for me was a blessing, because I think when you do sales, you learn about business so much more, I think, than maybe other positions and other roles in a company. And it really only further fueled my entrepreneurial ventures, as well as my knowledge and education around business. And ever since then, I've done so many things, whether it be in the entertainment space, managed actor, comedian Lil Rel, Kelly Howard, a few other comics here in the Chicago area, owned the Comedy Club for about 5 years, did real estate for about 8 years. I mean, you name it, I've touched it. And most recently, kind of something I grew up on, Golden Era Hip Hop, which is something I love. I created a company back in 2017 called Classic Hip Hop Lives, which is essentially a celebration of that era of hip hop and producing concerts, et cetera. And that's a cool project, as well as I was able to start my own financial literacy and credit restoration franchise. And I've been doing that for the past 2 years as well. And that's that's really probably my most notable work, even though I love the other things. And it's truly because I'm just helping so many folks reach goals that maybe they didn't know how to reach or didn't know if they could reach. And so ultimately that is probably to date my most meaningful work.
Awesome. Listen, you just dropped a whole lot of something on us. You know what? The beautiful thing about when doing these interviews and simply saying, tell me about you, we get a chance to hear and know so much about the person that is sitting in this seat, right? What qualifies you to be able to tell me anything? And the reality is that we have someone who has been an entrepreneur since he could remember.
Yeah.
We're talking about trying different ventures and doing all those things. I have some prepared questions, but I'm gonna be honest with you. I already know that we're not gonna make it through these because we are definitely in store for some stuff. I want us to start with the very last business that you told us about, the financial literacy, and that being the thing that's been most meaningful. Why? Why is that?
I think, can you still hear me okay?
Mhm.
It was probably because it was one that I didn't anticipate. Going into every other venture, I knew exactly what I was doing and the reasons behind it. This particular venture, I really went in and it was self-serving. I also had less than perfect credit, and so I was going to actually improve my credit, right? And I really didn't know how much I would learn, et cetera. I was paying somebody to have my credit fixed, but as I got involved, I like to be a student of whatever it is that I'm actually doing. And so as I was able to, shout out to my daughter checking me out, um, I was able to learn about building credit and understanding how credit moved, et cetera. And as I learned that, it was the type of person I am. There was no way that I was going to learn information and not give that information away. And as I started to talk with people and saw how even people that, smart, educated people still really didn't understand how credit worked, then I knew that this was information that I had to share. And I mean, I love to. Like, I love to at the end of the day because it's almost, I mean, you can literally change people's lives with the information that you have around credit and just building wealth and just money in general. And so that's why I say the other things are great. They're fun. I'm able to make money. But when you're able to help other people change their lives and help other people reach goals, there's really nothing better than that. And for me, not necessarily a religious person or not necessarily going to soup kitchens and feeding the homeless. And so this is the way that I actually do my work on earth, is how many people can I help? Right. And so, so it's a feel good for me as well as I help other people.
Awesome. Awesome. So I think I want to dive more
Starting with
into
my daughter.
starting with your daughter. Shout
Yeah.
out to your
Yeah.
daughter who was watching. Hey girl, hey, right? I definitely want to talk a little bit more about that. For those who are watching who may not know the purpose or the reason for why I've started this series, is we've gotten started because we want to close the gap. And obviously, closing the gap doesn't happen immediately, but it happens through us having education to pass those things on. And
Right.
you're saying to me that you've put yourself in a position where you're helping other people with financial literacy, but most importantly, you sound like you've been a pretty money savvy guy, up until this point. Let's talk about that. Like, what do you believe are the top three things holding people back from winning and or increasing their money? What would be the top three things you think people do?
So I wouldn't have probably said this 10 years ago. So today I'm going to say fear, fear. And let's say fear slash lack of belief in self. So that's kind of one. I think two is people may be, and I'm not calling people lazy, but maybe their habits are lazy, right? So I would say that. And then thirdly is education, right? And so, and education kind of goes through the other ones as well. But those would be three if I had to kind of give you three things that I think um, prohibit people from taking the next step.
I want you to expound upon that education because it sounds like in the financial literacy, that is what you are doing. Why does the knowledge of financial literacy matter?
Um, It's everything, right? It's everything. It's specifically for Black people, right? Black people, ultimately, in my opinion, we have so many challenges in this country, and you can either ask for equity or you can kind of do for self, right? And then at the end of the day, right, there's always going to be things that impact us that are larger, but oftentimes if you're able to do for yourself, for an example, and we've talked about this, but stock market participation, right? That's something that for most of my life I knew it, right? When I started working in corporate, 20 years ago, I saw people that didn't look like me, and that's what they were doing, right? In addition to working, they were playing the stock market heavy, and I never, and for some of the reasons we talked about, I never dove into that space in terms of getting educated and becoming educated. But I think today the reason that is so important is it opens the door to families and making more, and by making more, being able to provide their kids sometimes better access to things, whether it be schools, education, neighborhoods that they grow up in. And so it all kind of starts at the foundation of education. And I think today education is so much more easier to get, right? You can get an Audible subscription for $14.99 a month, right? I think gives you 1 or 2 books a month, audiobooks that you can listen to about a certain topic, right? You can go on YouTube and just dive into hours and hours and hours of information. And so I share this with my team a lot when it goes into the stock market. I had a goal of I want to learn more about the stock market, and I took these simple steps, right? Because I'm not the biggest reader, right? I can read, but it's just I love to the way that I learn to watch things. So every morning I used to watch sports in the morning, like sports talk, talking head type shows, and now I watch Squawk Talk on CNBC, right? For like from the time I get up from like 6 to 8 before I start my 9 to 5, I watch news about companies, businesses, stories, etc., right? About certain stocks, what's happening out there. And then at the end of my day, right about 4 o'clock, I watch it for about an hour and a half on the flip side. And now I'm watching the actual market on Robinhood, etc., throughout the day. And so I didn't take any big leaps. I just tweaked a couple things that I was doing during my day to make sure that I'm dripping that knowledge on myself every single day. And I'm a numbers person, right? So 3 hours a day, Monday through Friday, that's 15 hours a week. That's 60 hours a month. How am I not going to know more than the month before if I'm doing 60 hours a month, not in hardcore reading? I didn't necessarily take out time and do additional time. I just changed what my day looked like. And what will I look like in 6 months when I take 60 times 6, right? And I have 360 hours in the market. Like that's how quickly you can really change your mindset and what you know about things and educating yourself without having to have any extra money or anything else. It's just what you do with your time. So I don't know if that specifically answered your question, but
parts of it did, but you definitely added additional insight, which sounds like what you're saying to us is just shifting our mindset and shifting gears on where we're spending our time, right? That extra time, instead of watching America's Got Talent, right? We watch something else that puts that knowledge in. So knowledge, you talked about financial literacy, educating people and helping people, right? What I didn't tell everybody is, guys, knowledge is one of my business partners in credit restoration. But knowledge, you have a webinar or live that you have titled, "Why Aren't You at a 750?"
yeah.
Why is that important, and why do you think most people aren't at a 750?
Yeah. So I titled it "Why Are You Not at a 750?" Because really it's just my story, right? It's my story. And what I wanted to kind of impart upon people is here's someone that from the outside looking in was semi-successful, right? Good job, 6-figure earner, living in a good part of town. But because I could, the trap that I always say about credit is I was still able to do 90% of the things that I wanted to do, right? Buy a car, buy this, buy that. I could still do those things. But what I didn't realize is that I wasn't doing those things efficiently, right? And so I wanted to capture that audience. I just chose 750 because that's a number that most people will agree that's a good credit score is to be at a 750. And I wanted to just start the conversation. And as I went through the presentation, I broke down how your credit score is calculated, which I understand, even if people know how your credit score is calculated, they don't necessarily know how to apply that to themselves, right? Some people are like, oh yeah, I know, credit utilization is 30% and paying your bills is 35%, but they don't necessarily know how to take that back and break that down even further to say, okay, when I look at these 5 categories, where am I losing points, right? What am I getting in this area? What am I getting in this area? And so if I'm at a 680, a lot of times when I talk with people is, hey, I'm at a 680 and I don't know how to get to a 750, right? And so by going through that presentation and breaking it down, but sharing some of myself, letting people know just 2 years ago, I had zero idea as well, right? I thought it was a myth. It was something magical. As how do you get to these scores? And so as I found and educated myself, I share that with people, and it's going over very well, because I think this now, even if you're at a 700, which is a pretty good credit score, you still want to, that intrigues you as to, wow, how can I get to a 750 though? And usually in that conversation, and whether it's 750, 780, 800, right? No reason to stop. But once you learn how to tweak your score and how much of that you can manage, I just found it something to be very important, and it captures more people, right? It captures people that may even believe that I have pretty good credit, right? It captures them even because they still might not be at a 750. So that was kind of the reason I did it, and it's been really successful. I've done a few of them. I'm going to start to do them a bit more because people ask me to do them, but they can be exhausting as well because I share a lot.
I can imagine, breaking down credit and the education surrounding it. When I look at that subject or that topic matter, you can opt to be going live about sports or anything else. And a 750 is a very great place to be. But, more importantly, it's why is getting to a 700, a 750, why is any of that, important for anybody?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I'm sorry I left that out. So, um, obviously, the higher your credit score, the lower your interest rates are, right? And if you're lowering your interest rates, you're putting money back in your pocket. So I kind of talked about that trap earlier, right? You got a 650, you can go and pick up whatever kind of car you want for the most part. But at the end of the day, what people don't think about is they think about, okay, I can get the car. So goal number 1, check, right? Goal number 2 is when the salesperson comes back and says, hey, you wanted to be at a 550. I got you at a 550. You're like, check, right? I got my car and I got a 550 a month. That was my goal, right? But what you're not looking at maybe instead of 60 months, they took you out to 72 months, right? Maybe you're not looking at your interest rates. You're not looking at some of the things that they might have done to get you in that car. And then on the flip side, what if I come in with my 820 and buy the same car? Would you feel good knowing that you're paying a 550 and my note is 485, right? And that's the piece that people miss. So you don't care that you could pay the 550. You're like, why is homie at a 485? Or why is his note 45? And if I multiply that each month and I multiply it over 60 months or 72 months, now you see the difference in what you're paying versus what I'm paying. We're the same people. And the only difference is I focus on pushing my credit up, right? And that's what put me in position. And so oftentimes when I'm talking to people, it's to get them to understand that part of it. And we're just talking about the car, right? But then we can go and talk about your car insurance, right? We can go talk about if you have a home, we can go talk about that loan. Yeah, you can. All you need is a minimum 580. Well, you don't want to buy a house at a 580, right? It's the biggest expense that you're going to take on. You want to purchase that house with as high of a credit score as you can possibly have. And so as you start to go item by item that you're potentially leveraging your credit for, and you're looking at the interest payments that you're paying because of your credit score versus having maybe a higher credit score, you can start to literally look at how much additional money is going out of your household every single month because of that score. And usually that conversation gets people to look at it differently. And that's what I'm trying to do, is because most times we don't run into people that tell you, hey, I just got so much extra money, right? Usually they don't have enough. And this is a way to get enough by simply taking action and improving your credit.
I have you on the show, and for those who are watching on tonight, we are speaking Knowledge Beckham, podcaster, financial literacy advocate. And I like to call him the money guru, right? He is definitely master increasing money and growing money. Right now, we're talking about our credit, but you've said the word money and cash a few times. So, not switching gears, but what I want you to do, because I hear the same message so very often to people. Knowledge, what's the difference between credit and cash? So, two-part question. What's the difference between credit and cash? And what would you say to the person who said to me, normally guys that say to me, oh, I only buy everything cash?
Yeah. It depends, right? Most times the guys, and usually it is guys who tell you they buy everything cash. Um, your cash isn't that long and strong, first and foremost. So one, it's kind of bravado because there's just moves you can't make. So it kind of, if you only buy things cash and that's what you say, then I kind of know that the moves that you're making aren't really major moves, right? Because you're not going to grab the $300,000 building cash, right? You're not going to buy the Range. It's not that you have to have a Range Rover, but if you're riding a Range Rover, you're not going to buy that 85 cash. You're not, right? A few folks and folks that really do have cash, the ball players that really have loan cash, somebody told them the importance of credit, and so they have good credit and cash now. And so it's just when I hear that, I know somebody's missing the boat, and it just really depends on whether I want to have a larger conversation around credit. But the reality is, I share with people as well, right? Just again, a lot of it I take with my personal story because I've always been able to earn, right? But I haven't always had the financial literacy at the level that I want, and I'm still growing and learning. But I think what I kind of realized is that yes, you're able to do some things cash. When it comes back to really wanting to make moves out here, you're going to have to leverage your credit, and you want to leverage your credit, right? So to give you an example, I talked about starting Classic Hip Hop Lives, my celebration of golden era hip hop. When I started that business, it was in 2017, and it just happens to be in 2017. I had probably my second highest earning or highest grossing year from an income perspective. And so as I'm doing these shows, and this was before I actually started down this whole financial literacy journey, I'm doing these shows, and concerts cost, right? You got a venue, artists, this, and I'm paying for it all cash. And I felt fortunate, right? Because I had the cash to do it. But now having the credit, all of those shows could have been done on cards, right? Meaning credit cards, right? Where you're putting this down, you're buying the plane tickets, the venue, whatever the case may be, right? Sending that through PayPal, but you can use maybe your card on PayPal. And all you're going to do is, okay, great. It costs X, right? It costs $20,000. That's what I need to put down to do this show. And okay, I'm going to have to stretch that money for 60 days, right? So I'll make the minimum payments. I'll look at the interest that I have to pay. So now my 20 grand has gone to really a cost of 20,800, right? But the reality is there's no cash that has come out of my pocket to do this show. Now I sell tickets, the money comes back in, I pay back off the cards, I take my profits, and guess what? I never spent a dollar out of my pocket, right? That's the key of credit. Whereas before, I got $20,000 out in the universe, $20,000 of cash that's not working, right? Because it's in the hands of other folks for me to take a shot of doing this. And what if the show doesn't go off the way that I think it has to go off? 20 going, right? If it's on credit, I can extend that. Maybe in that same time, if I have enough credit, I'm able to do a second show, and the second show makes up for the first and second. But the reality was I never really spent any of my own cash, right? And so a lot of times if somebody's talking about they're doing things all cash, more power to them. But then I'm just asking, how strategic are you? How strategic do you truly get down?
Knowledge, there's a part of your testimony that introduced you to this financial literacy business.
Yeah.
I want you to share for the person who's listening, who says that I am all cash, right? We talking about the man who's been selling candy since he was a kid, finding ways. Classic Hip Hop Lives, property, all of those things. So you got the cash. Can you tell me what really made you come to this financial literacy things for people who say, I got the cash?
Yeah. So there's two. I know where you want me to go. There's two things that that really made this such a passion project of mine. So the first was the stock market, and the stock market, the housing crash, right, of 2008. Because in that process, that was a tough process. At that time, I had maybe 6 properties, and I ended up letting a couple of properties go during that time. And one, because I just didn't really understand credit repair and restoration, I literally thought, right, like many people think, you have to just leave your credit on the side. There's nothing proactive that you can do. And so I let basically like 10 years ago, right, that I was working off of cash, but the reality was there were things that I could not do, right? So I was renting, right? So I was paying, so I'm living in the West Loop paying $3,000 for rent, and I'm doing all of that, all because I did not know that there was anything that I can do to actually proactively work on my credit, right? So it really just let me know where that education gap was, and essentially how much money I lost during those years being undereducated. But then what they call kind of the compelling event for me was the fact that it was about August of 2018, and I was getting ready to move from my place in the West Loop into Pilsen, and I wanted to expand my business. Classic Hip Hop Lives, right? We were primarily a concert event company, and I said, you know what? I want to get a brick and mortar, right? So when people come to Chicago, tourists, etc., I want to have this cool art gallery space that people can come to, and everything in the gallery was inspired by golden era hip hop at that time in hip hop. And so I find a place, and shout out to my man, Vince Sherrod. He's a photographer out of Chicago. It was his space, and I remember from way back when. Super dope space. I'm already in love with it. I'm thinking how I'm gonna lay this thing out. I got my business plan together. I told you in 2017, I came off my best year from an income perspective. So I'm like, cool. I done made a couple hundred of them things. I said, when I take this to them, this is gonna be good. This is sweet. And I had not checked my credit score, right? I was assuming, hey, you know what, that was a while ago, those things that fell off. And of course, I'm doing business with somebody who doesn't look like me, right? And so and I'm bringing in something that's golden era hip hop. And so, but I'm tight, right? Things are tight, but my credit score wasn't, right? And so there was somebody else who was interested at the time, and essentially hearing the young lady, the realtor, basically say that the owner, was concerned with your low credit score. It just made me feel away, right? Because at that particular time, I felt strong. I felt like I've hit my stride, and to hear her not give me something that otherwise I'm in perfect position for because of my credit score, I told myself that will be the last time that someone tells me no because of my credit score. And so I dove all the way in at that particular point, and that's really why I'm here today. That's why I do my podcast, the Dropping Knowledge podcast. That event triggered probably what you're going to see for the next 20 to 30 years from me, is because, as you can see, right, I probably got an issue with hearing no. So that's that.
Really, an issue with hearing no. We would have never guessed that. We would have never guessed it.
I said, you know what?
This is extremely dope, right? And there's this one question I was kind of going back and forth about whether I wanted to touch, simply because it was something that I brazed over last week on my live. But you know what? People can't get too much of good information. You basically went into amazing detail with us about basically, yeah, you can have cash, but what is the saying? Cash is king and credit is power.
Right.
You talked about something though. Knowledge. There's such thing as good debt. What you call it good debt, and is that what you were referring to when you talked about fear? Is all debt equal?
So, all to me, right? I know that there's people that are far more they're far greater veterans and seasoned around financial literacy than myself. And so I know that some folks say no debt, right? You should have no debt. That's not me, right? The fact that I know that credit can be recycled, restored, replenished, etc., then go make it happen. And if you ever need to come back here again because your credit got ruined, you go through seriously, you go through the process again. You don't allow that to finish you, but then you also want to be educated as you maybe go after entrepreneurial ventures, etc. You structure them the right way, so that maybe you're not personally hurt from a credit perspective when you're doing some of these things. But yeah, there's definitely different types of debt, right? I think if you're an entrepreneur and you want to build a company, as best you can, you should do that with somebody else's money, right? Ultimately, at the end of the day, why not, right? And you simply factor in the cost of that capital that you're leveraging to do what you want to do. But at the end of the day, if something doesn't work, I'd always rather it be somebody else's money than mine, right? And so, so yeah, I mean, I've heard like you shouldn't have like debt's no good. I'm like, well, how do you get a dope crib? Like, how do you get a dope crib? And a crib is not like a car, right? Buying a home, that's an investment. That's still the number one way to build wealth, right? And so, yes, might be able to buy cash and have a house somewhere. But now we're talking about, well, maybe if I have that house and maybe I was able to pay for it, I was able to pay $60K cash for it. That's great. But more than likely, that house is not in the neighborhood that I wanted to be in. More than likely, that house is not going to appreciate the way that a house in another area may appreciate. And so, yes, I was able to afford it and not go into debt. But at the end of the day, I would argue that maybe a house that you did go into debt for actually ends up being a better investment based on a number of different factors. And so I'm always going to leverage debt when possible, always with the goal of coming back out of it, right? And I very rarely have gotten myself into getting bad debt where it's simply around a lot of things, right? The worst that I might do is cars, right? But even with that, right, you don't want to buy your car new, right? You let somebody else take that initial depreciation, right? Get you a vehicle that's a couple years old. If you do buy a brand new vehicle, go lease instead of buying it, right? Lease depreciating, or at least depreciating assets, own appreciating assets. And so there's general rules that you can do, but I'm all about, getting debt to push yourself forward, not silly and dumb debt.
That's good. That's good. Much appreciated. Yeah, I definitely am watching time. I knew we were going to struggle not to make it through these topics. Before I kind of get to some of those closing questions, Knowledge, I do want to have you talk a little bit about, the purpose in this series I have is to give people knowledge to make them better. So if there's someone out here watching now or watching later that says, well, that dude, he has this going, this going, this going, this going. I don't have any of that. It's too late. Like, what do you say to that person to tell them, what they can do to maybe jumpstart building their money, their credit or finances?
Yeah. So, one, it's never too late, right? You can have that feeling, right? On my podcast, and shout out for all of you checking it out. Make sure you check out the Dropping Knowledge podcast, droppingknowledgepodcast.com. You can check out episodes on YouTube. Also, we're on Apple and Spotify. But I had an episode a couple weeks ago where I spoke with a buddy of mine, Will Montez. We talked about building wealth in the market, right? In the stock market. And I made that comment during our interview. And I said, I feel like I've been on the sidelines for too long, right? And and he was like, it ain't never too late, right? And the reality is it's never too late to get started, right? Because once again, the time that I happened to come in, so I hadn't played the stock market ever really, but in the last few months when I came in, I happened to come into a quarter that was the best quarter in probably like the last 10 years, right? And so even though I started very late, I got in during a time that you saw record highs from some of these companies, et cetera, and was able to make, decent money during that time. And so it's never too late to get in. And I think also you have to realize and appreciate that a lot of us, we say that we're doing it for our kids and our family, but then we can talk about us. And so if I'm learning today, guess what? I'm learning and I'm able to pass that on to my daughter, right? So the fact that I'm talking about this, my daughter's actually on watching the live. And so she's able to soak this up 20 years younger than me, right? And so if that makes her stronger, then it's, even if I started a little later, she's going to start early, right? And so it's still a win at the end of the day when you talk about the family, right? And so I think that, whether it's a business, right? It's never too late because, again, you can have your run, but if done well, wouldn't it be great to pass a business down to your kids, right? Because you can't pass a job down. Wouldn't it be great to pass a business down to someone? And ultimately, again, back to that education. Education is key, right? What are we able to what are we able to teach our kids, right? I saw my man on here, James Morris. He was actually a guest of mine on my third episode. And although we talked about Black history in America, right, he's written a book, and it's dope stories. You guys have to check that out. But he wrote a book about I think it's real estate. But he said basically what happened is his daughter went to school, and they were looking like where the books that talk about us, right? Where are the people in the books that look like us? And there wasn't one, and so he wrote one, right? And so the kid's name in the book is his daughter's name, right? And so look at that sense of ownership, what they're learning, what he's teaching, etc. And it doesn't matter that he's in his mid-40s and he's just writing a book. It's now she'll probably write her first book at 20 years old, right? Or 18 years old. And so we inspire our young folks to do certain things. And so again, even if you think it's a little bit later on for you, it's not just about you. You're also going to be passing that information on. And so get busy, and you never know. You may create something that, yeah, you know, for the next person you might have wanted to get involved or do it at 25 years old, and now you're 40 years old, but who knows, right? You might come across something that you have a great 5-year run and much further than you ever thought you would be in that time period. You never can call it. You never know when it's your time and when something might just pop, right? So
Earlier on, you made a statement, and basically you said real estate is one of the top 3 wealth builders.
yeah.
One time I was watching on one of your podcasts on Dropping Knowledge, and I remember feeling like, man, this is one of the dopest episodes he's had. And you share 3 things. You share with us 3 things that you believe, you know, in your opinion, are the top 3 things to create wealth. What are they?
Yeah. So, and this was kind of my adult report card, right? Like, how are you doing on your adult report card? And so, and the way that I broke it down is these are 3 of the biggest differences between the rich and the poor, right? And so one was stock market participation. And so at that time I looked like, I'm not in the stock market. So now F, right? And so I immediately said, I need to get involved. Because if you think about it, let's say you don't have the biggest hustle, right? You're not trying to do buildings and property because it's just scary to you, right? Or whatever, you don't have time, etc. Well, the reality is, okay, if you're making good money, what are your choices? You right, you definitely can put it in 401k, max out the 401k, but use your 401ks. You know, they're good, and you can look at the returns on that money. But the market oftentimes, even if you're just doing like ETFs and mutual funds, you know, on average 8 to 10% a year, right? Even if you got a high yield savings account, most you're gonna get is 2%. And if it's in your checking or savings account, you're losing money, right? And so you got to definitely do something in the stock market. And again, that's why the episode was so great. So we talked about, if you're the beginner and you're like, I don't know how to pick individual stocks, right? Then just go with the names, you know, go with Nike, go with Walmart. They're really not going to let you down. Now, granted, they might not grow the same way as maybe a tech stock or something like that, but you don't have to be in it for that. All you want to do is grow your money at the end of the day. And so stock market participation was 1. 2 was real estate ownership, and, you know, real estate. And so, and again, that doesn't even mean being a real estate investor, right? That simply can be just owning the place that you live in, right? And what that can produce and what that can create over time. And so that was 2, which I was good there. So check, right? And then 3 was ownership in small business, right? And that can look a few different ways, but I felt like check there because I have my financial literacy and credit restoration franchise, right? And so I have a small business there. I have Classic Hip Hop Lives, ownership in that, right? I have a business there, and I've been looking at other businesses, because sometimes when you invest as well, if you have money to invest, it may not be at all building your own business. It may say, hey, you know what? I know Sharonda has a business. She's opening up a boutique, and I know she's super stylish. She's a businesswoman, etc. Hey, you know what? Can I give you X for 20% equity in your business, right? And you may need the capital. I give you that. That's ownership in small business. And we work it out that, hey, you know what? Quarterly, you're going to look at those profits after expenses, and you're going to give me 20% of the profits, right? So even if that's, I open up my check or open up my mailbox and I'm making, you know, $1,000 every quarter, that's $4,000 a year, right? So even if that's the case, my money's making money, right? And so those were kind of the three things that that pointed out the differences between the rich and the poor. And so I felt like, okay, cool. I got 2 out of 3. Let me go ahead and get 3 out of 3. And so as of today, I'm 3 for 3.
All right. Well, great job at having an A on that report card.
Thank you. Thank you.
I know that there's work to be done for all of us. Listen, your answer hit some things on the head. Your answer even covered some questions I wasn't going to make it to on today, because one of my questions was talking about how losing, what it means when people say you're losing money when it's sitting in a checking account, a savings account.
Right.
So, I definitely appreciate that response. And I'm going to be honest with you and tell you, that having these sorts of conversations, being a part of listening to your Dropping Knowledge podcast, but just being in a completely different circle has definitely had me open up my eyes and say, what does my adult report card look like? Right.
Right.
And as we move into the last couple minutes of this live, because I do want you, even though you've already shamelessly plugged your podcast, I do want to give you a moment to plug your podcast. But I want you to talk about one thing for me. You've talked about the small business, you've talked about real estate, you talked about stocks. Knowledge, why is it important? You're doing it. Why is it important to have multiple streams of income? What's the big deal? I got a good paying job.
Yeah. So it's to each his own, right? To each his own. And I think for me, sometimes it doesn't come off the greatest. I started my career in sales, right? So at 21 years old, I went into sales, and in a sales job, unlike other professions, everything is about money. How did you end last month? And they want to know your numbers, right? If somebody says, oh, it was good. What does good mean? They want an actual number, right? As sales reps, when we were young, it's like, yo, how much was your commission check? And so I've always talked about money, right? And so I've never run away from that. And the reality is, when you look at just Black people's space and place here in this country, usually we're economically challenged, right? So whether you want to talk about money or not, it's important, right? When you even talk about people that do well, right? The reality was, okay, well, great. When your kids go to college, do you have the money to pay for 4 years or 5 years of college? If not, it doesn't. So yeah, I know you had a house. I know you had cars. Do you have that? If not, then they're going to have to take on debt. And when they come out of college, they got debt. It's going to take them longer to get in the game, right? Where sometimes our counterparts don't. And so you really can't tell me that money's not important. And you don't have to have money, right, to actually ball out, go crazy, and make bad decisions. But essentially, it opens up access and it opens up options. And that's what you want. And for me, that's what I want as an adult, right? Like, I want to be able to have options and make the moves that I need to make, and then be able to truly build something so that, so I have two grandkids. So shout out to Carly and MJ, but, they're 5 and 4. But when they hit 21 years old, I feel like it ain't a wish. It's my responsibility, right? Check this out. I came out of college in 97, right? So let's say MJ's 5. Let's say he goes to college. He comes out at 21, right? So that's 16 more years. So in 16 more years, it's going to be 2036. So I came out in 1997. He comes out of college in 2036. If he has to go through the same process I did, which is interview and ask for a job, we ain't moving forward, because that was 39 years before. That was 39 years before. He's doing the exact same thing that I did. They went through the same process and hoping and playing a game and doing this to make sure that he can take care of himself. That's not what I want, right? I want to make sure that he's walking into something and Carly's walking into something. And to do that, that's probably not going to come from my one stream of income, right? It's probably going to be because I got busy out here and I had to do other things. So forget the most simple one, which is having a job, you lose your job, and now you can't take. That's the most simple and basic. But I'm talking about really putting yourself in a different position and stratosphere that you're absolutely going to need to create additional streams. And it just puts you in position of power, right? I like to play from a power position, and many of us never play from that, right? We don't play from power positions. We are, it's funny, and I know we're getting ready to wrap, but I was talking to my nephew yesterday, and we were having a nice heated and spicy discussion last night. And I was telling bro, you know, and I talked with this, me and James talked about this on the podcast as well, episode number 3, season 2. But we talked about the fact that where does the KKK live, right? And they live everywhere, right? They're in the police departments, they're in corporate America, they're everywhere. And so the reality is, looking and having the skin color that we have, you better not be so comfortable in anything that you're doing that you don't control to feel like you're good. And as a man, my whole family could be riding on that. So
Yep.
I'm in position as a man. I'm in a place that I'm truly unsecure, regardless of what I'm making. And I just don't want to be in that position. And when you start to tap into multiple streams, real estate, stock, etc., you're just putting yourself in a position of power. And so that's why it's so important to me. And that's why I talk about it so much.
I definitely appreciate it, Knowledge. Listen, you have the people watching this live. They're going crazy in the comments because this is the good stuff, right? This is why I reach out to individuals like yourself or the gentleman from last week, because this is what it looks like to pass on a wealth of information.
Yeah.
Positions of power, and many of us don't move from it.
Right.
I absolutely hate that these things have to be timed and we stop at the 45-minute mark because it just got good. I got so many other questions for you, but I do want to give you a moment to share your platform and talk a little bit about Dropping Knowledge podcast as you wrap up on today's.
Got it. You got it. So one, I want to give it back to you and say thank you very much. I've been waiting for my opportunity to get onto your platform. You've been doing an amazing job with these podcasts. You're wearing me out, so I'm going to have to see if you can help me get all of my graphics and branding together. But you're doing an amazing job, so keep it up. For folks that this is your first time meeting me, thank you for tuning in. Again, Knowledge Beckham on Facebook, so feel free to friend me on Facebook. But I developed the Dropping Knowledge podcast roughly about 4 months ago. It was about a month into COVID. I'm sitting around the house and we can't do much, right? And as my financial literacy is building and the business is growing, I'm starting to have conversations with folks because you got a chance to catch up with people. And we're talking about topics that, to be honest, it's not always things that I'm talking about with my group of people, but it was such good information. And I said, now you have a really unique network of experts basically in other areas, and you can keep these conversations to yourself and take that information and that brain food and make it work for you and your family. But I said, really, we should put this out there for the masses, right? And if there's 1 or 2 people to pick up something that makes sense, it's great. So I've tried to pick up topics and focus on topics that I think are important, that I think that some of us, if, you know, I'm a big scale guy, right? On a 1 to 10, I try to say, where are we at on life insurance? If you really drill down and ask 10 people really some basics about life insurance, how well would they understand it? And if I think that we're at like a 4 through 6, I'm like, we need it then, right? And I go out through my network, I try to find that person, and we come and do something similar to you. And we have a 45-minute conversation. And my hopes is that somebody's sitting there and they're watching and they're like, wow, I'm much more educated about life insurance now. I'm much more educated of what I need to do to build business credit. Right. I'm much more educated about, I'm not as scared to jump into the stock market because now I have a little bit of a game plan as to how to do it as a beginner. And so I initially started to let's see what people think. But as I've gotten into it and I've gotten such great feedback, that's why we actually made it a podcast. And so we're on Apple and Spotify. Make sure that you look for Dropping Knowledge podcast. You have to put all of that in because there's a few Dropping Knowledges out there. We also just put the YouTube page up a couple of days ago. And so all of 14 episodes are out on the YouTube page. Again, search for Dropping Knowledge podcast. Check those out. And really, at the end of the day, they're for us. It's just trying to close the gap so that we can start to at least get our minds in place to strive for positions of power. And we do that through education. And so that's why it's such a passion project and so important for me to continue to do.
Awesome. Awesome. You know, amazing job at all that you're doing.
Thank
you know,
you.
From the financial literacy, from building on the podcast and just passing on the information. It starts somewhere. Thank you again for being on today's series. Right. I definitely appreciate it. And I've had my turn on your podcast, but I want to come back for season 2.
Yes, you got it.
But
You got
thank
it.
you. Thank
You
you
got
so
it. Thank
much as
you.
we come out to a wrap. That was absolutely amazing knowledge. I definitely appreciate you. Guys, that is a wrap. We are over by just a few minutes, but sometimes these things get very good. Listen, knowledge dropped a lot of knowledge on you. That title had a bunch of pun intended, but it was also very factual, right? Tonight we share with you knowledge around your credit, your finances, but you mastering or becoming a better person with your money. I have a question for you. What is your adult report card? Just because we are where we are today doesn't mean we have to stay where we are. So I don't have all of the check box on my report card, but real estate, I'm about to check that one off. Small business, I'm checking that one off, and learning stocks as well. Doesn't really matter where you started or where you are, but it matters where you're going. And those are all through decisions. I hope that each and every one of you were inspired by tonight. Don't forget to like, comment, and share. Stop learning all of this information and not bringing people on with you. Let's all get better together. The way that we close the gap is that we have information to pass on to one another. And that is what this series is all about. I am more than grateful for you. Thank you for being here tonight. We will be back next week, next Sunday at 7 p.m. And we're going to be talking to small business owner Shanina McGregor, who has an amazing story and testimony of where she is today and how her small business is walking her away from corporate America. You guys know where to find me, right here on this Facebook page, right? Thank you for joining us. You can find me here on Facebook at Sharonda McDaniel, Instagram at Empowered with Sharonda, and I am also on YouTube, Empowered with Sharonda. Guys, go subscribe. Make this wealth of information that is absolutely free, impactful in our communities to people that you know. You guys all stay safe. Again, thank you so much for joining us. You stay blessed. God bless each and every one of you. Have an amazing holiday on tomorrow. Good night, all.